Before the story, subscribe, leave a like, and share your story in the comments. My name is Ethan Miller, and this is the story that still haunts me. A night I wanted to forget, but that insists on coming back, especially when I'm alone. Driving in the dark, and my mind begins to wander to places reason prefers to avoid. It all started on an ordinary weekend, when Claire, my girlfriend at the time, my friend Josh, and I decided to go to a music festival in a town about 3 hours from home. It was an incredible experience. The music, the people, the energy in the air, everything seemed perfect. When the event ended, we were exhausted but happy. It was that kind of tiredness you feel after living something intense, something that makes you feel alive. Around 2 in the morning, we decided to head back. The main highway seemed like the safest choice, well lit and busy. But the GPS, that old troublemaker, suggested a shortcut, a secondary road, shorter, that could save almost an hour on the trip. I've always been the type who likes to adventure, to escape the usual. The idea of saving time and taking a different route seemed exciting. Without thinking twice, I turned right, leaving the main highway. The moment we left the highway, something changed. The sky was clear, with a full moon hanging high and pale. But the trees, oh the trees. Tall and dense, they rose beside the road like silent sentinels. Their crowns joined above us, forming a dark corridor that seemed to swallow all the light. The car's headlights cut through the darkness, but the light barely passed the tree line. It was like being inside a tunnel of living shadows. The road was narrow and poorly maintained. Potholes, patches, and stretches where the asphalt looked carelessly painted created an uneven path. The steering wheel trembled a little in my hands, and the car vibrated. The silence around us was almost palpable, so dense I could feel it pressing against my skin. Not even a breeze stirred the leaves. No sounds of animals, nothing. It was like the world had stopped. Claire, in the back seat, was quiet, looking out the window, her face reflected in the glass. Josh, meanwhile, seemed to try to distract himself with his phone, but his eyes slipped to the window from time to time. I knew they felt it too. They felt that something was wrong there. Something that I, stubborn as I was, still didn't want to admit. As I drove, my gaze returned to the dashboard. The fuel gauge was dropping too fast. A pang of worry hit me. We had filled up before leaving, but something didn't seem right. There was still some fuel, but the distance to the next station was long, and there was no sign of civilization in that darkness. Could I run out of gas there? Stopping in the middle of that shadowy corridor was the last thing I wanted. My fingers gripped the steering wheel tightly, and a silent anxiety grew inside me. Then, on the horizon, a timid light appeared. A pale, flickering glow that seemed to dance against the darkness. As we approached, the glow turned into an old neon sign. The letters blinked at an irregular rhythm, some failing, others going out completely. Gas was all I could read, like a fragile invitation in the desert of the night. The gas station slowly appeared before us. A small building with peeling paint and dirty, fogged windows. A single gas pump stood in the lot, lit by a yellow spotlight that barely pushed away the dense shadows around. The place seemed frozen in time. There wasn't a single car in the lot, no sign of movement, just that weak light, the silence, and a feeling of abandonment that made me swallow hard. Suddenly, a figure appeared at the door. A tall, thin man whose pale skin seemed almost translucent under the yellow light. His deep-set eyes stared at me for far too long. There was something about that figure, maybe the slow way he moved, or the lack of a smile, or that fixed gaze, that sent chills down my spine. He slowly approached the pump and started filling the car. Complete silence. Not a word, not a glance away. His movements were precise, almost mechanical. Almost like he was there to fulfill a task programmed a long time ago, without any will or emotion. While he filled the tank, my hands trembled a little and my heart beat faster. I couldn't stop looking at him. That figure seemed like a character from an ancient nightmare, a presence outside of time and space. I paid quickly, thanking with a silent nod. I got into the car, feeling his heavy gaze follow me as I started the engine. We moved forward, swallowed again by darkness. The silence inside the cabin was absolute, heavy. Minutes later, in the rearview mirror, 2 headlights appeared in the distance. I thought it was just another regular car, but they approached too fast. Within seconds, the vehicle was glued to our tail. The strong light invaded the car, throwing shadows that seemed to deform and stretch across the dashboard. I tried to speed away to escape, but it matched every move. I slowed down, and it slowed down too. It was a silent chase, a macabre dance in the dark. The weight of that presence behind me squeezed my chest, and a growing anxiety began to eat away at my thoughts. I felt like I was being hunted, like that car was more than a vehicle, a living shadow. Then, without warning, the headlights vanished. They didn't dim or fade, they simply disappeared, leaving the rear-view mirror a black void. We continued in silence, each lost in our own thoughts, the weight of the night cloaking us like a suffocating mantle. Then something on the road caught my attention. A figure stretched out in the middle of the lane. I slowed down and stopped. I got out of the car, the early morning cold cutting through my skin. When I approached, the shock was brutal. It was the gas station man, fallen, covered in blood, breathing with difficulty. His body looked fragile, and blood flowed in dark pools on the road. There were no signs of a fight, no clear traces of what might have happened. I looked ahead, and the headlights were there again. Still fixed, shining intensely, almost blinding. The air felt heavy, suffocating. My body didn't respond. I could only watch as the light grew, spreading, growing until it swallowed everything around me in a pure white. When I regained consciousness, I was in the car, driving again. I didn't know how I got back there. The attendant had vanished. In the rearview mirror, there was only darkness. I kept driving until the main highway and never took that shortcut again. But even today, when I'm alone on a road at night, I feel the weight of those headlights following me, even when there's no one behind me. Before the next story, subscribe, leave a like, and share your story in the comments. My name is Sarah Collins, and what I'm about to tell you is the story of the night that changed everything. The night I learned in the worst possible way that some places simply shouldn't exist. I was on a trip with my 2 best friends, Mike and Jenna. We left late on a cold Friday night, escaping the city to spend the weekend at a remote campsite. The road was our only companion, the radio playing softly, the dim dashboard lights illuminating our tired faces, the smell of cold coffee and air conditioning in the car. I was driving, feeling the cold steering wheel under my hands, while Mike excitedly talked about the adventure awaiting us, and Jenna dozed off, cradled by the comfortable silence in the back seat. As we left behind the last city lights, the road seemed to stretch endlessly. Tall, dense trees formed living walls around us, their shadows moving with the wind that made the windows vibrate. The air carried a damp smell of wet earth, and every breath felt like a sigh from the forest around us. Mike mentioned an old rest stop he had discovered on a previous trip, a somewhat forgotten place with a strange charm. Despite the fatigue and desire to head straight to the campsite, curiosity got the better of me. I took the dirt road leading there, a narrow and rough path that made the car shake with every rock and pothole. When we arrived, the rest stop was shrouded in thick twilight. The yellowish light of a flickering street lamp cast long distorted shadows stretching through the trees. The silence was absolute, deeper than any night I had ever experienced. Not even the sound of wind or animals. I parked the car carefully, hearing the tires creak on cracked asphalt covered in dry leaves. As I stepped out, the cold air hit me like a wall. The smell was a strange mix, mold, old gasoline, and something metallic I couldn't identify. My boots echoed on the uneven ground while the trees swayed gently, their shadows seeming to reach toward our bodies. Mike and Jenna stretched their limbs, but I felt a growing tightness in my chest, an anxiety with no clear reason. The rest stop shop had foggy windows, coated with dust and the marks of time, and a sign flickering faintly as if struggling to stay lit. Mike went in first, heading to the counter, but he was taking too long. Jenna and I exchanged nervous glances. Then I heard the whisper, almost inaudible, but clear enough to send chills down my spine. It was my name, Sarah. A slow, insistent call that seemed to pass through walls and wrap around me. My heart raced. I searched for the source, but there was no one there. The air grew heavy, and a feeling of being watched took over me, as if something invisible was there, hiding among the shadows. Jenna heard nothing, seeming oblivious, and Mike was still taking his time. The light began to fail, flickering irregularly, and the shadows on the walls danced as if trying to escape. The silence was broken by the sound of the shop door opening on its own, slamming hard against the wall. Mike ran out, eyes wide and breathing heavily, saying he felt something strange, something that made him flee. We returned to the car, but when trying to start the engine, nothing. We tried several times, but the car seemed dead. That's when we saw the figure. A hooded shadow standing at the edge of the parking lot, motionless and cold. The air around it seemed frozen, heavy, almost suffocating. Fear took hold of me almost physically, a crushing weight that left me breathless. On the third attempt, the engine roared to life, and we sped away from that place. The silence inside the car was nearly suffocating. Jenna didn't speak, just stared into the darkness, and Mike tried to talk, but the words wouldn't come. I felt my heart pounding so hard it felt like it would explode in my chest. We drove for a long time without exchanging a word. The feeling of running from something invisible enveloped us. I replayed everything in my mind: the smell, the flickering light, the whisper of my name, the noise of the door, the hooded figure. Had it been real? Or a hallucination caused by exhaustion and fear? Mike said he felt a presence, something he couldn't explain. Jenna agreed, saying she sensed something wrong but didn't know what. The cell phone had no signal, and the idea of going back was unthinkable. In the following days, nightmares woke me up with the dusty rest stop, the whisper of my name, the cold fog. I avoid traveling at night and places like that. Every time I pass an empty rest stop, I feel that gaze following me, reminding me that some doors should remain closed. After we sped away from that forgotten rest stop, the silence inside the car felt almost like a physical weight, something that tightened my throat and made it hard to breathe. Jenna said nothing, her eyes fixed on the darkness passing by the window, empty, as if she was far away, trapped in a place inside her own mind. Mike tried to break the silence a few times, but his words failed, stumbling over the fear we felt. I could hear my own heart pounding loudly, a fast drumbeat that seemed to reverberate through my whole body. Every time I blinked, I felt as if that invisible gaze was still glued to my back. I tried to convince myself that it was all just fatigue, imagination, or an effect of the dark, silent night. But deep down, a part of me knew it was more than that. I remembered the smell of that place, a mix of damp earth, old mold, something metallic that still sends chills down my spine just thinking about it. The sound of the shop door slamming on its own still echoed in my head, a dry knock, almost a scream trapped in the silence. That night, I caught myself looking in the rearview mirror several times, as if expecting to see something approaching. Something that shouldn't be there. Every shadow passing by the road seemed to come alive, and my whole body tensed, ready for the worst. I tried to talk about it with Mike and Jenna later, but it seemed that the right word to describe it simply didn't exist. It was a feeling of emptiness, of being watched without ever seeing the watcher. A silent, ancient fear that stirs the most primal survival instinct. In the following days, the nightmares didn't let me rest. I dreamed of that dark shop, the foggy windows, the faintly flickering sign, and that hoarse whisper repeating my name, louder and more insistent each time. I woke up sweating cold, with the feeling that something was next to me, even when the room was empty. Every sound in the house, every creak of the floorboards seemed to turn into the shop door slowly opening, bringing back the hooded shadow. I avoided going out at night for a long time. One avoided traveling on deserted roads, and when I had to, my eyes never stopped scanning the darkness around, as if looking for a sign that the forgotten rest stop wasn't just an abandoned place, but a presence that followed, that waited. To this day, whenever I pass an empty rest stop on a road, my body reacts before my mind understands why. A shiver runs down my spine, and that suffocating feeling returns, like a primal warning to never look back. I don't know exactly what that rest stop was, nor who or what that figure was, but I know there is a limit we must not cross, an invisible veil between the known and the unknown. And that night, we crossed that veil unwillingly. Before the next story, subscribe, leave a like, and share your story in the comments. My name is Jake Thompson, and this is the story of the night that nearly destroyed my sanity. The night I chose to help a stranger on the road, a decision that pushed me to the edge between reality and the unknown, a place where time seems to unravel and darkness hungers for souls. It was a cold autumn night, the kind that freezes the air and makes the world feel suspended between silence and the distant sound of wind dragging dry leaves. I was driving home after an exhausting day at work. My body ached, my eyes were heavy, and all I wanted was the safety of my warm room. I drove along the main road cutting through the ancient forest, a familiar route but always unsettling at this time of year. The radio played quietly, songs barely registering in my mind as it drifted between the day's events and a deep fatigue. The trees lining the road cast long, twisted shadows that seemed to come alive under the flickering streetlights. Every kilometer passed in silence, with only the steady hum of the engine and the occasional rustle of leaves. At several moments, I felt as though I was being watched, a strange and unsettling feeling that slowly grew, like a shadow creeping closer without me noticing. Then I saw him. On the side of the road stood a man, tall, hooded in a heavy jacket, his face completely hidden in the shadow of the hood. His arm was outstretched, asking for a ride with a slow, almost desperate gesture. Something inside me screamed to keep driving, to not stop, but a mixture of guilt and instinct made me brake and open the door. The cold night air rushed inside, bringing a chilling breeze that felt like a warning. He got in without saying a word. The silence between us was so dense I could feel its weight. I glanced in the rearview mirror, trying to see his face, but all I saw was darkness beneath the hood, a shadow that seemed to suck in the light. For the first few minutes, nothing was said. The man just stared out the window at the road, motionless, as if he were part of the night itself. The radio began to crackle, static invading the air with a harsh sound that seemed determined to break my concentration. My breathing grew heavy, my chest tight. I felt a strange cold that wasn't from the chill outside, but something deeper, like an invisible presence settling inside the car with me. Finally, his voice broke the silence. A low, hoarse voice, more a whisper coming from some deep pit within him. He began to tell a story about the road we were on, about inexplicable disappearances, about travelers who were never seen again, trapped between worlds in a temporal trap no one understood. I wanted to disbelieve, to laugh off the fantasy, but the seriousness in his voice and the somber tone stopped me. He said the road was hungry, that it fed on those who stopped to help, that it lured souls into its limbo. My heart raced. I looked around, but the road seemed to narrow, the trees closing in tighter and tighter, forming a suffocating tunnel of shadows. Fear grew inside me like a flame burning away reason. I began to realize we were trapped, passing the same landmarks, the same trees, the shadows stretching and deforming. Everything spun in a macabre repetition. I tried to speak, to ask him to get out, but my voice failed, as if the air itself had been sucked away. The man smiled, or something I interpreted as a smile, and the darkness around him grew, taking shape and density, expanding like a black cloud of nightmare. The car's lights started to fail. The steering wheel trembled in my hand, slipping momentarily out of control, and the car slid off the road, stopping near a black, silent lake where a dense fog spiraled slowly upward like spectral fingers. I was frozen, unable to move or scream. He stepped out of the car with slow steps, turning toward me and finally revealing his face. It was a void, no eyes, no human features, just a hole of cold shadows that froze my soul. My scream got caught in my throat. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't respond. He approached, his cold smile the last thing I saw before being swallowed by total darkness. The awakening was slow and confused. I was in the driver's seat, alone, the sun beginning to paint the sky with orange hues. The car was stopped at the roadside, the radio playing a normal, harmless song. Nothing seemed to have happened, but I knew everything had changed forever. The following days were torment. I couldn't sleep without reliving every detail of that night. The damp, cold smell, the static on the radio, the heavy silence that seemed to hide voices. My muscles tensed at every shadow, my heart pounding in every silence of the night. Every car passing by seemed to hide something behind its headlights. I replayed every second in my mind, every look from that faceless stranger, every whispered word like a curse. Was it all real? Or had my mind played a trick, a delirium caused by exhaustion? But I know what I felt. I know what I lived through. I know what the road whispered to me that night. Since then, I've never stopped to give a ride to anyone at night. I never ignored that inner voice begging me to keep going and not look back. And every time I pass a deserted road, a shiver runs down my spine, and that invisible gaze seems to follow me, reminding me that some choices can cost far more than we imagine. Before we close tonight's journey through the shadows, I want to thank you for staying with me until the end. If you felt the chill of these stories, if the darkness followed you for even a moment while listening, then don't let it end here. Hit the like button, it helps keep these nightmares alive. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the channel. That way, you'll never travel the night roads alone again. Because the next story may be waiting just around the corner. Sleep well. If you can.